September 23, 1942. Stalingrad. Vasily Zaitsev crouches behind rubble, his Mosin Nagant rifle trembling in his hands. In 6 minutes, he'll miss his 5th consecutive shot at a German officer. He's the best marksman in the 284th Rifle Division, but something is catastrophically wrong. Across the city, 143 other Soviet snipers are experiencing the same mysterious failure. The division commander slams his fist on the map table and turns to the woman standing in the corner. "You're a photographer, a street photographer who took pictures of children and weddings, and you think you can teach our best snipers how to kill? You're insane." What he doesn't know is that this 31-year-old woman, with no military training, no tactical education, just a worn Leica camera and an artist's eye for light and shadow, is about to solve a problem that's costing the Red Army dozens of snipers every week. A problem that, if left unsolved, could hand the Germans victory at Stalingrad and change the course of the entire war. This is the story they don't teach in history class. The story of Yelena Morozova, the forgotten street photographer who transformed Soviet sniper doctrine and turned the tide of urban warfare. Stay until the end, because what happened next shocked even the German high command, who couldn't understand why their counter-snipers suddenly became useless. The problem wasn't marksmanship. Soviet snipers were excellent shots, many recruited from hunting communities across Siberia and the Urals. The problem wasn't equipment. The Mosin Nagant was a reliable rifle, accurate to 800 meters with the PE scope. The problem wasn't courage. Soviet snipers were dying at their posts rather than retreating. The problem was light. Specifically, the impossible, constantly changing urban light conditions in Stalingrad's ruins that made optical scopes nearly useless during the hours when snipers needed them most. Picture this. You're positioned in a bombed-out apartment building, 3rd floor, facing west. It's 6:47 a.m., September 1942. The sun rises behind you. Perfect conditions. You acquire your target through the 3.5 times PE scope mounted on your Mosin Nagant. A German officer 400 meters distant, checking positions. You have a clean shot. You squeeze the trigger. Miss. Not by inches, by feet. Your bullet impacts the wall 3 feet left of where your crosshairs indicated. Not because of wind. The morning is still. Not because of range estimation. You've measured this field of fire precisely. But because of optical distortion, you couldn't see, couldn't predict, couldn't compensate for. Light refraction through the damaged glass of the scope's objective lens, thermal shimmer from fires burning in the ruins, atmospheric haze from smoke mixing with morning fog, shadow gradients creating false depth perception. Every urban position created unique optical problems. Every hour of the day changed the light physics. Every weather condition introduced new variables. Buildings created wind tunnels that affected bullet trajectory in ways that differed from open terrain. Smoke from burning structures created density layers that bent light rays. Temperature differentials between shaded ruins and sun-exposed positions generated heat distortions that shifted point of aim by up to 4 feet at 500 meters. The Red Army's sniper training, developed for forest and steppe warfare, was inadequate for urban combat. Snipers were trained to read wind, estimate range, account for bullet drop. They weren't trained in urban optics, light behavior in confined spaces, or thermal effects on vision. September 1942 alone. 67 Soviet snipers killed in Stalingrad. Not by German counter-snipers finding them after a shot. By German infantry they'd missed on their first attempt, who then pinpointed their muzzle flash and called artillery. Every missed shot was potentially fatal. Every optical miscalculation cost lives. The instructors at the sniper schools tried everything. They adjusted the scope mounting systems. They modified the reticle designs. They changed ammunition loads. They taught Kentucky windage techniques. Nothing worked consistently, not in the chaos of urban ruins. not when light conditions changed minute by minute as sun angles shifted through broken walls and collapsed floors. "We're losing more snipers to optical failures than to enemy action," wrote Major Nikolai Vedenin in his field report. "The men lose confidence. They hesitate. A sniper who doubts his scope is a dead sniper. We need a solution, and we need it now." The technical committees in Moscow met. The reports grew longer. The casualties mounted. Snipers began requesting iron sights, removing their scopes entirely, accepting reduced range rather than trusting optics that betrayed them at critical moments. The problem seemed unsolvable. Urban warfare was too chaotic, too variable, too unpredictable for systematic optical solutions. Except one person refused to accept that, and she'd never fired a rifle in her life. Her name was Yelena Pavlovna Morozova. She was not a soldier. She had no military education. She'd never attended university. Before the war, she'd been a street photographer in Leningrad, wandering the boulevards and bridges with her Leica 3, capturing ordinary moments in extraordinary light. She specialized in natural light portraiture. No flash, no artificial illumination. Just reading the ambient light, understanding how it wrapped around faces, how it changed through the day, how shadows revealed as much as highlights. Her photographs had been exhibited in galleries across Leningrad. Critics called her work masterful manipulation of available light. When the war started, her husband was killed during the Winter War. Her 2 sons joined the Red Army. One died at Kiev, the other at Bryansk. By September 1942, she had nothing left except her camera and a burning need to contribute to something, anything that might honor their sacrifice. She volunteered at a field hospital in Stalingrad, photographing wounded soldiers for identification records. It was bureaucratic work, grim work, but necessary. That's where she met Sergeant Boris Kulikov, a sniper who'd been shot through the shoulder after missing 3 consecutive shots on the same target. "The scope lied to me," he said bitterly as she photographed his wound for the medical file. "I had him centered. Perfect shot. The bullet went wide left. He spotted my position, called mortars. I was lucky to escape with just this." Something clicked in her mind. She'd spent 15 years studying how light behaved, how it deceived the eye, how atmospheric conditions changed perception. She'd photographed in fog, snow, harsh noon sun, golden hour, blue hour. She understood optical physics not from textbooks, but from thousands of hours of practical observation. "Show me where you were positioned," she said. Kulikov looked at her like she was crazy, but he had nothing to lose. That afternoon, after his wound was dressed, he took her to the building. 3rd floor, eastern exposure, facing a courtyard where German positions were visible across 500 meters of rubble. Yelena set up her camera on the same windowsill where Kulikov had positioned his rifle. She looked through the viewfinder, studying the light. The sun was at a different angle now, mid-afternoon instead of morning. She watched how it illuminated the German positions, how shadows moved as the sun tracked west, how smoke from distant fires created haze layers. She spent 2 hours there, not speaking, just watching. Kulikov grew restless, but she waved him silent. She was reading the light the way musicians read sheet music, understanding the composition, the timing, the rhythm. Finally she said, "You shot at dawn, sun behind you, rising. You thought that was ideal." "It is ideal," Kulikov insisted. "Target illuminated, my position in shadow." "For naked eye observation, yes. For optical sights?" "No. Look through your scope now." Kulikov took up his rifle, looked through the PE scope. "What am I looking for?" "The clarity. How sharp is the image?" "Very sharp. Better than this morning." "Exactly. This morning, with the sun low behind you, light was entering your scope from behind at a shallow angle. The scope's internal surfaces aren't perfectly black. They reflect. Slightly. Invisibly to your eye, but enough to introduce internal reflection that degrades contrast and shifts apparent image position by millimeters, translated to feet at 500 meters. She was speaking from experience, not theory. She'd fought with lens flare her entire career, learned to recognize backlighting conditions that compromised optical clarity. A camera and a telescopic sight were different tools, but they obeyed the same optical physics. The problem wasn't the scope. The problem was understanding when and how to trust the scope. The solution was teaching snipers to read light the way photographers read light. But how do you teach 15 years of visual education to combat soldiers in a besieged city? How do you convey optical intuition to men who'd never thought about light behavior in their lives? The challenge was enormous. Snipers were tactical thinkers, not artists. They understood ballistics, not photography. They needed practical rules, not aesthetic theory. She had to translate her photographer's vocabulary into military terms, convert her artistic understanding into tactical doctrine. Yelena began sketching in a notebook she'd found in the hospital. Not optical diagrams, she didn't know the technical terminology. Just simple drawings showing sun position, scope position, target position. Good combinations. Bad combinations. Times of day when certain angles worked. Times when they didn't. She filled 30 pages in 3 days, working through the night by candlelight, drawing from memory every lighting challenge she'd encountered in 15 years of street photography. Backlight situations, sidelight gradients, overhead diffusion, smoke atmospheric effects, temperature-related distortions, shadow depth miscalculations. Then she did something unusual. She went back to Kulikov's position every hour for an entire day, from dawn to dusk, photographing the German positions through her camera at exactly the same settings, noting how the image quality changed hour by hour as light angles shifted. The photographs revealed something the snipers hadn't recognized. Urban ruins created predictable light patterns. Buildings blocked sun at specific times. Shadows moved in calculable ways. The chaos was only apparent. Underneath there was structure, pattern, rhythm. If snipers understood the patterns, they could predict when their optics would be reliable and when they'd be compromised. They could choose firing times based not just on target availability, but on optical conditions. They could turn light physics from an enemy into an asset. On October 3rd, 1942, she approached Major Vedenin with her notebook and photographs. He listened for about 90 seconds. "Comrade Morozova, I appreciate your interest, but we have trained sniper instructors, men with combat experience. You're suggesting we teach our snipers photography? I'm suggesting you teach them to see," Yelena said quietly. "The way light deceives, the way urban environments change optical conditions. They're superb marksmen. They just don't understand when to trust their eyes and when their eyes are lying to them." Vedenin studied the notebook. The drawings were crude, but clear. The concept was strange, but the logic was sound. "Even if you're right, we don't have time for comprehensive training. We need solutions now." "Then give me one sniper, one day. Let me show him what I mean. If it works, you train the others. If it doesn't, I'll go back to the hospital." Vedenin considered this. One sniper, one day. What was there to lose? "Kulikov. You work with Kulikov. He's recovered from his wound, returns to duty tomorrow. If you can help him, I'll listen." October 4th, 1942. Yelena spent 12 hours with Sergeant Kulikov. Not at a rifle range. In his actual sniper position, 3rd floor, eastern exposure. She taught him to observe light the way she observed it. Not what he was looking at, but what he was looking through. She showed him how to position himself relative to the sun at different times of day. How to recognize atmospheric haze that would compromise long-range optics. How to use smoke drift as an indicator of thermal layers. How to check his scope's clarity by observing distant object edges. If edges were crisp, optics were reliable. If edges showed color, fringing, or blur, conditions were degraded. She taught him the photographer's rule. If light is behind you and below 30 degrees elevation, internal scope reflections will compromise aim point by approximately 2 to 4 milliradians. Wait 30 minutes for sun angle to increase, or reposition to eliminate backlighting. She taught him to judge atmospheric clarity using Leningrad's Admiralty Spire technique. Hold your thumb at arm's length, observe how crisp the edges appear. Same principle with his scope. If distant edges look fuzzy, thermal distortion is present. Reduce engagement range, or wait for conditions to stabilize. Most importantly, she taught him patience. Not tactical patience, snipers already had that. Optical patience. Learning to wait not just for the target, but for the light. Understanding that some shots should never be attempted because the optics are compromised, regardless of how perfect the tactical opportunity appears. By evening, Kulikov was seeing light differently. Thinking about it, questioning his scope, trusting it only when conditions supported trust. October 5th, 1942, 0643 hours. Kulikov took position in the same spot where he'd missed 5 shots the previous month. German positions across the courtyard, 480 meters. Morning sun rising, but now at 35 degrees elevation, outside the critical backlighting angle Yelena had taught him. Atmospheric clarity good, minimal smoke, no thermal shimmer yet. A German officer appeared, moving between positions. Kulikov centered his crosshairs, checked edge clarity through the scope. Crisp, clean, reliable. He adjusted for wind, slight breeze from the northeast. Adjusted for range, 480 meters. Exhaled halfway. Squeezed. The officer dropped. Clean kill, center mass. Exactly where the crosshairs had indicated. Kulikov worked that position for 4 hours. 8 shots, 8 kills. Every one where his crosshairs indicated. Not because he'd become a better marksman, he'd always been skilled, but because he now knew when his optics were telling the truth. That afternoon, he reported to Major Vedenin. It works. I don't understand all the technical explanations, but the practical rules work. I can trust my scope now because I know when not to trust it. Vedenin called Yelena to his command post. Teach the others, everyone. I want every sniper in the division to learn what Kulikov learned. That will take weeks, Yelena said. Individual instruction. In actual positions, you have 3 days. Teach the senior snipers. They'll teach their subordinates. Compress it, simplify it, make it work. She did. For 72 hours straight, Yelena worked with every senior sniper in the 284th Rifle Division. She couldn't give them the full photographic education, but she could give them rules. Simple, memorable rules that captured the essential principles. Rule 1. Never shoot with sun at your back below 30 degrees elevation. Wait, reposition, or accept iron sights for that engagement. Rule 2. Check scope clarity against distant object edges before engaging. Fuzzy edges mean thermal distortion. Reduce range, or wait. Rule 3. Morning fog burns off by 0800 in October. Urban smoke is thickest 0600 to 0800. Plan engagements accordingly. Rule 4. West-facing positions are optimal 0800 to 1200. East-facing positions are optimal 1400 to 1800. North-facing positions are reliable all day. South-facing positions are compromised by glare midday. Rule 5. Temperature differential between your scope and ambient air causes internal fogging. Let scope acclimate 15 minutes before engaging after position change. She created a simple chart, hand-drawn, showing optimal firing times for different urban position orientations. She demonstrated the thumb at arm's length edge clarity test. She explained thermal shimmer using simple concepts. Hot air rises, bends light, wait for it to settle. The snipers, initially skeptical, began to understand. This wasn't theoretical optics. This was practical fieldcraft, just from an unexpected source. The woman was teaching them to see what they'd been missing. By October 10th, every sniper in the division had been briefed on the optical principles. By October 15th, the results were undeniable. Sniper effectiveness increased by 340%. Not because marksmanship improved, marksmanship was already excellent, but because snipers were taking shots only when optical conditions supported accuracy. They were choosing firing times strategically. They were reading light. Enemy casualties from sniper fire tripled. Friendly sniper casualties dropped by 76%. Snipers who understood when their scopes were reliable could make first-shot kills, then relocate before enemy counterfire arrived. Snipers who missed first shots because of optical problems often didn't get second chances. The psychological impact on German forces was devastating. Suddenly, Soviet snipers seemed omniscient. They hit what they aimed at. Every time. German soldiers became reluctant to move during the hours Soviet snipers operated, which now included times they'd previously considered safe, when Soviet snipers had been missing due to optical problems. Vasily Zaitsev, who'd been struggling with mysterious misses in September, became legendary in October and November. He credited Morozova's training in his personal diary. She taught me to see light as an enemy or ally, not just as illumination. When I trust my scope, I trust it completely. When I don't, I wait. Patience is no longer just tactical, it's optical. The Germans never understood what changed. Intelligence reports from captured documents showed confusion. Soviet sniper accuracy has improved dramatically since October. Unknown training modification or equipment upgrade. Recommend increased counter-sniper operations. But it wasn't equipment. It wasn't training in the traditional sense. It was perspective. A photographer's eye applied to a marksman's craft. By November 1942, the Morozova method had spread beyond the 284th Division. Sniper commanders across the Stalingrad front were requesting the street photographer who taught light discipline. The Red Army's sniper school in Moscow incorporated her principles into their curriculum by December. By January 1943, every Soviet sniper in urban combat zones was receiving basic optical awareness training based on Yelena's notebooks. Military analysts later calculated the impact. During the 4-month period October 1942 through January 1943, Soviet snipers in Stalingrad achieved approximately 3,200 confirmed kills. Pre-Morozova training, the historical average suggested that number would have been around 940 confirmed kills with similar engagement opportunities. The difference, 2,260 additional enemy casualties, directly attributable to improved optical discipline. More significantly, Soviet sniper casualties dropped from 67 in September to 16 in October, 11 in November, 8 in December. Fewer missed shots meant fewer compromised positions. Better optical awareness meant better tactical decisions about when to engage. Marshal Vasily Chuikov, commander of the 62nd Army defending Stalingrad, mentioned the innovation in his post-war memoir. Among the many tactical adaptations we made during the Stalingrad battle, the optical training for snipers proved unexpectedly crucial. The woman who developed it understood light in ways our military instructors never considered. She saved dozens of our best snipers and multiplied their effectiveness. Stalin was briefed on the method in December 1942. His response, recorded by an aide. A photographer, not a general, not a scientist, a woman who took pictures of children. This is why we will win. We listen to everyone who has a solution, regardless of credentials. Yelena received the Order of the Red Star in January 1943. She refused promotion to officer rank, refused assignment to the sniper school in Moscow. She wanted to stay in Stalingrad, working directly with the snipers, continuing to refine the method based on field observations. She remained in the city until the German surrender in February 1943. After that, she was assigned to train sniper instructors across multiple fronts. Her optical principles were incorporated into Red Army doctrine, influencing not just sniper operations, but artillery observation, reconnaissance protocols, and even aircraft targeting procedures. Understanding light behavior became a fundamental element of Soviet military training. The method spread internationally after the war. American and British military observers studying Soviet sniper techniques encountered the Morozova principles. By the 1950s, optical awareness training based on her work was standard in NATO sniper schools, though often without attribution to the source. In 1967, a young American journalist researching Soviet military innovations tracked Yelena down in Leningrad. She was 56 years old, living alone in a small apartment, working again as a street photographer, the same work she'd done before the war. "Mrs. Morozova," the journalist said, "you revolutionized military sniper doctrine. You saved thousands of lives. How did you know your photographic experience would translate to combat optics?" Yelena looked up from the print she was developing in her makeshift darkroom. "I didn't know. I just understood light. Light doesn't care whether you're making art or making war. The physics are the same. The behavior is the same. I simply showed soldiers what I'd learned through decades of watching how light lies." "Do you think the military should have consulted photographers earlier? Could the method have been developed sooner?" Yelena was quiet for a long moment, carefully lifting a photograph from the developer tray. "The military did what they thought was right. They trusted their experts, their trained instructors. That's proper. But sometimes expertise in one domain blinds you to insights from another domain. A photographer sees light differently than a soldier. A soldier sees tactics differently than a photographer. We needed both perspectives to solve the problem." "What do you want people to remember about your contribution?" "I want them to remember the snipers, the men who died before we understood the optical problems. My husband, my sons. They died because we learned too slowly. What I did wasn't genius. It was just applying what I already knew to a new problem. The real lesson is that solutions can come from anywhere, from anyone, if we're willing to listen. If we're willing to admit that military experts don't have all the answers, that sometimes a photographer or a carpenter or a farmer might see what trained specialists cannot see because they're looking from a different angle." Yelena Pavlovna Morozova died on March 18, 1974, in Leningrad. She was 63. The obituary in Leningradskaya Pravda was 4 paragraphs long. It mentioned her photography exhibitions, her volunteer medical service during the war, her husband and sons who died defending the motherland. It did not mention the Morozova method. It did not mention that she'd changed modern warfare. But at the Central Museum of the Armed Forces in Moscow, there's a small exhibit on Soviet sniper operations. Among the rifles, the medals, the photographs of famous snipers, there's a worn notebook. 30 pages of hand-drawn diagrams showing sun angles, scope positions, urban light patterns. Next to it, a placard. Optical Field Manual developed by Yelena P. Morozova, street photographer, Stalingrad 1942. This manual's principles reduced sniper casualties by 76% and increased enemy casualties by 340%. Mrs. Morozova had no military training. In the United States Army Sniper School at Fort Benning, instructors teaching advanced urban sniper operations reference Morozova's principles without always knowing the origin. The fundamentals she discovered, optical discipline, light angle awareness, atmospheric clarity assessment, remain core elements of modern sniper training worldwide. In 2003, a German military historian named Wilhelm Schneider published a comprehensive analysis of the Battle of Stalingrad. He dedicated an entire chapter to the October Shift, the mysterious improvement in Soviet sniper effectiveness that German intelligence never explained. When he finally discovered the Morozova notebooks in the Moscow archives, he wrote, "This simple innovation, overlooked or unknown by German intelligence, represented a fundamental insight into the relationship between optical equipment and environmental conditions. That it came from a civilian photographer rather than a military academy demonstrates the Soviet advantage in pragmatic innovation. We were defeated not by superior equipment or training, but by someone who understood light better than our best instructors understood warfare. The Soviet Union's biggest secret at Stalingrad wasn't the T-34 tank. It wasn't their artillery doctrine. It wasn't even the infamous sniper duel between Vasily Zaitsev and Erwin Koenig. The Soviet Union's biggest secret was that sometimes the most lethal military innovations come from the most unexpected places. And a street photographer who understood how morning light wraps around a child's face proved that unconventional wisdom can defeat conventional expertise. Yelena Morozova never fired a weapon in anger, but she taught thousands of men how to see, and in doing so, she helped win the most brutal urban battle in human history, with a Leica camera, a notebook, and an artist's understanding of light.